Greetings and welcome back to yet another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Kane. So today's Daily Run started out on the lucky foot, and I don't know how many more foot puns I can actually put in, but we're Kane, so we have the lucky foot, and I felt like that was an appropriate joke to make in this video. But what I really wanted to talk about here is Ipecac in the very first treasure room, and I feel like Ipecac is one of those items that you find early on that kind of defines the run as a whole. You know that you're gonna have a lot of damage later on, maybe not as much tear delay, but you're always gonna be in constant danger, and I would say aware that when you try to enter a room and when you try to fight the enemies, you're just trying not to blow yourself up. And this is especially apparent in daily runs, I feel like, because every time you're gonna hit yourself, you're really gonna reduce that damage penalty, or I would say increase it depending on, I would say, your perspective of things. And it's gonna be something that's gonna be really influential. So, of course, can we afford to skip Ipecac in this case? I don't think so, because the rest of the run, actually, if you look at the items, is not that good. I do think that some people said they found Brimstone, and obviously that's much better, but as far as my run goes, it definitely was made good by picking up Ipecac. Sure, you know, I did take the inherent risk of just damaging myself a little bit too often by having it, and I definitely did in certain cases, but besides it, you know, it just gives you so many things that you would hope to get in a regular run. It allows you to go to secret rooms, second secret rooms, blow up rocks, blow up tinted rocks, blow up pots. It gives you an amazing damage, which means that if you find any items that generate flies, if you get a guppy transformation, a rotten baby, anything like that, it's just gonna give you so much things to work with. It's just, I would say, a premium item to have, but at the same time, even though it's so strong, it still feels like whenever you're playing it feels like a challenge, and it feels, I would say, very involved, and that is exactly what I like about this item. I don't think it shows up too often, but when it does show up, especially early on, I feel like it really defines the run. It really, I would say, makes it a little bit more engaging. And this is especially apparent with someone like Kane, I think, because his inherent range and shot speed aren't all that high, which means that your Ipecac shots feel a little bit more deliberate. They're not just projectiles that go to the actual screen and just go from one door to the next one in Mach 5 speed, but they're very slow, very deliberate, and when you try to aim at an enemy, you actually have to aim and kind of be aware of where they are. You have to take something into account, like for example how fast your projectile is moving, or maybe how fast the enemy is moving in your direction. You have to account the enemy AI and things like that. And I feel like Ipecac, like most other items, really does depend on just maybe which rooms you encounter. And this particular run, I would say, wasn't all that unkind to us, but it definitely had, I would say, an above average abnormal amount of poops or dips that kind of split into more ones. And I think with Ipecac, just in general, the most annoying enemies are dips and spiders, and basically any enemy that is small and moves erratically, just because it's very hard to hit them. You never really know if they're gonna go in your direction, and when that ends up happening, of course, it's very easy to take some unnecessary damage. But as we actually got through the run, and when we got through the, I would say, the first 5 or 6 floors, the later stages were actually very good and very easy to some extent, even though we had a very low tier delay, because obviously we do have Ipecac, but later on also picked up Polyphemus, so that kind of tanked it a little bit more. Even though we had this low tier delay, it did allow us to, I would say, still be efficient, because the enemies were kind of closely packed together, and I always felt like I was in control. And I do imagine if there were a lot of rooms, for example, with fistulas in them, now that could have been a very annoying run and something that I don't think I could have really dealt with, but with how everything turned out, I feel like it was right. This run definitely felt right, and it definitely felt it was like also very skillful as well. There are also some things that kind of help this run shine bright. Now, just having this, what I just talked about, is definitely good enough, but having something like the Ivy Bag definitely does allow you to, I would say, capitalize on the build that you have at the time to an even greater extent. Not only can you avoid damage by basically using Ivy Bag in a compromising scenario, but later on when you get the Polaroid, it does really allow you to be very safe against some of those not earlier, but some of those harder bosses that you necessarily can't really deal with well. So it kind of, I would say, alludes to your weakness and improves them to an extent that you can really kind of go through the floors without necessarily taking too much damage. And if you're just good at using the Ivy Bag in the right time, not only are you going to get some coins out of it, you're also going to be able to replenish your spirit hearts or red hearts, and of course that's just going to make it for a much more enjoyable run. One thing I think, not what I think, but one MVP of this run was definitely Holy Light, and Holy Light doesn't maybe seem all that good on a run that has Ipecac, just because you don't really shoot all that often. But with having 7 or later 10 luck, it actually does come pretty close to being that half of your shots are going to be Holy Light shots. And when that ends up happening, you can imagine that with something like 100 damage, the Holy Light shots are really going to do a lot of work. So even though the initial Ipecac shot rarely kills a boss, the Holy Light shot that follows it is usually going to be effective enough. And not only that, it's also going to have quite a bit of range, and it's going to allow you to deal with some of those, I would say, nasty rooms that had a lot of enemies in them. The only thing I wish I could improve is just having a little bit more AoE. Sure, you know that maybe Holy Light is AoE, but when I was fighting Fistulas later on in the run, while the Holy Light Shots definitely affected more segments at once, it only affected one stage of one segment. It never really hit the enemies that kind of came after that, and this problem was only solved after we got Contagion. Now, if I had Contagion before I fought Fistulas, I think this could have been easily avoided, but in this particular case, I think that was our only weakness, if maybe that's the right word for it. But besides that, we did finish the boss rush at a very opportune time. We actually got out of it super quickly. So now we're going to essentially Womb 1 and Womb 2, and we have 3 minutes per floor, which feels like a very comfortable time to actually go through and try to explore as much as possible for a run like this, just because it felt so strong. Obviously, I did take a little bit too much time there trying to open up the Eternal Chest for no particular reason. I figured, you know, maybe if I play it enough, I'm gonna get something good out of it, but I didn't get much more than consumables, and at this stage, consumables aren't really all that important. I essentially have an infinite amount of money, so I can actually kind of generate them from that, and getting pennies from chests isn't all that influential. The only thing I really can attest to getting is more red hell, just so I can actually use that to kind of be a little bit safer, but even that I don't think was really worth it. I should have just gone through the rooms and just tried to do as many of them as possible, just so I could increase my exploration bonus by a little bit, because again, I think this run had something like 14,000 points in total, and if I was just a little bit, I would say, more exploratory, if I just kind of took a little bit more opportunities to go through the floors, and for example gone to the second secret room on this floor, maybe I could have found something good, or maybe there was like a card hiding which would allow me to duplicate my bombs or keys, and that would have really put me kind of over the edge. And just standing there and trying to open up the Eternal Chest, I don't think that was really worth my time or my points, but you know, it's something I did. It's not that big of a mistake. It cost me like, I would say 200 to 300 points on average, which could have been easily alluded to, or not alluded. I don't know why I say alluded. I used it twice in this video, and I don't think it was appropriate any of the times. I know what the actual word means, but for some reason I'm just kind of trying to force it in there. I'm alluding to the fact that I don't know how to use the word allude in the first place at all, but okay, doesn't really matter. What I'm trying to say is that that I lost my train of thought. Doesn't matter. We're at Hush now, and we got Rotten Babies. So I did mention before that I was kind of struggling to hit some of those smaller enemies that, for example, spiders and things like that. And as we're actually going to the Void, we can expect to fight a lot of enemies like this, because there are a lot of random floors, of course, which means that you can expect a lot of dips to show up, a lot of spiders to show up. So I can just use Rotten Baby, or at least the flies that the Rotten Baby spawns, to shoot some of those, I would say, enemies which elude me, that kind of run around, and I wouldn't say are necessarily easy to hit. But when we got to the Void, of course, we did all of the exploration. We didn't really find any other things that kind of, would say, helped or boost our score even more. Now, something like a card could have been great, but nothing like that showed up, so I just decided to finish the run right here and then with 49,000 points and 8 points. So at least, you know, I'm glad we're over 49,000 points, even though we're so close to 50,000, and we did rank, I think, in the second place, and at the time where I checked this, I was actually in the third place. So this is actually, again, another very good performance and another very good run, especially the one following yesterday, where I think I was 5th at the end of the day. That top 3 spot really eludes me. Again, now this was an appropriate use of the word. It does elude me because it's so close, but whenever I feel like there's a good daily where I can perform well, someone out there is performing even better, finding ways to break the game, and obviously, you know, I still need a little bit of training if I actually hope to get to that number 1 spot and actually end up finishing there. I have a lot of top 10 finishes, but really, for the glory, we need to go for the top 3. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.